When discussing Martin Scorsese's career, most fans immediately think of the grand epics: Goodfellas, Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, The Departed. Yet tucked between his gangster sagas and spiritual explorations lies a psychological descent that few remember, but none should ignore. Bringing Out the Dead, 1999, starring Nicolas Cage as a New York paramedic on the brink of collapse, remains one of Scorsese's most daring and misunderstood experiments, and one of Cage's most haunting performances. A descent into the neon abyss. At the tail end of the 1990s, Scorsese reunited with his longtime collaborator Paul Schrader, the screenwriter behind Taxi Driver, to craft a story about another sleepless soul wandering New York's haunted streets. Cage plays Frank Pierce, a paramedic whose nightly routine of saving and losing lives erodes his grip on sanity. Each ambulance siren becomes a scream, each patient a ghost that won't leave him alone. Unlike Scorsese's more polished works, Bringing Out the Dead thrives in chaos. The film is drenched in neon light, pulsing with hallucinatory imagery and an almost feverish rhythm that mirrors Frank's insomnia and inner torment. It's both urban nightmare and spiritual odyssey, a film that finds poetry in exhaustion and redemption in despair. Cage's performance, a study in controlled madness. Nicolas Cage has built a career on walking the tightrope between genius and madness, but here, he channels both with heartbreaking restraint. As Frank, he's not the wild-eyed eccentric from Face/Off or Wild at Heart. He's a man silently imploding. His exhaustion feels tangible, his quiet breakdowns painfully human. Cage portrays Frank's unraveling not through hysteria, but through stillness. His eyes, perpetually bloodshot and hollow, convey more anguish than words ever could. When Frank tries to find salvation by helping Mary Burke, Patricia Arquette, the daughter of a man he saved, there's a fleeting glimpse of hope that quickly gives way to despair. Their fragile connection becomes the film's emotional center, grounding the chaos in something tragically real. Scorsese's most experimental work of the 1990s. While the 90s are often remembered for Scorsese's more mainstream triumphs like Goodfellas and Casino, it was also a decade where he took creative risks. Films like Cape Fear, The Age of Innocence, and Kundun showed his willingness to explore genre and tone, but Bringing Out the Dead might be his boldest experiment of all. Stylistically, the movie feels closer to a fever dream than a narrative film. Scorsese drenches the frame in surreal colors, quick cuts, and distorted sound, creating a psychological horror tone that few expected from him. It's as if Taxi Driver collided with a ghost story, and the result is both mesmerizing and unsettling. The film never achieved the commercial success of Scorsese's other works, but it carries the same spiritual undercurrent that defines many of his best films. Frank Pierce is, in many ways, another version of Travis Bickle, a man searching for redemption in a world that keeps decaying around him. The emotional core beneath the chaos. Beyond the gritty realism and psychological horror, Bringing Out the Dead is a deeply empathetic film. It examines the emotional cost of being a savior, how constant exposure to death can erode one's humanity. Through Cage's haunted performance, Scorsese shows how trauma lingers, not as loud screams but as quiet, sleepless nights. Frank's encounters with the dying aren't just calls for help, they're spiritual tests. Each patient he can't save becomes a ghost that whispers in his ear. By the film's end, redemption doesn't come through triumph, but through surrender, a quiet moment of peace after nights of unrelenting torment. Why Bringing Out the Dead deserves rediscovery. Bringing Out the Dead currently holds a respectable 74% on Rotten Tomatoes, yet it remains one of Scorsese's least discussed films. Perhaps audiences weren't ready for such a bleak, genre-blending meditation on guilt and salvation. But in hindsight, it stands as a bridge between Scorsese's gritty urban tales and his later spiritual explorations like Silence and The Irishman. For Nicolas Cage, it's one of his most underrated turns, a raw, soulful performance that strips away his trademark flamboyance and exposes something deeply human. His portrayal of Frank Pierce isn't just one of his best. It's one of the most emotionally devastating characters in Scorsese's entire filmography. 2 decades later, Bringing Out the Dead still feels disturbingly relevant, a portrait of burnout, compassion fatigue, and the invisible trauma of those who save lives for a living. It's not a film that soothes, it's one that lingers, like the ghosts that haunt Frank's weary conscience.